Hello and welcome to Corey's Datapad, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Skywalker Amidala family tree. So this is Anakin and Padme, their parents, and all of their known descendants throughout the end of Star Wars Legends, so all the way up to the Legacy comics, which is the final period we get covered. There is a little bit of speculation in parts of this, which I have actually indicated in the graphics you'll see differently from the stuff that is confirmed. I'll talk about that stuff towards the end. But aside from that, we get a pretty complete picture of, I guess, their genealogy going down from the time of the Clone Wars and the prequel trilogy through the end of the Legacy period, with one or two gaps. So our central pair here is Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala. Anakin having been born 9 years before Episode 1 and Padme 14 years before Episode 1. They get married in Attack of the Clones in about 22 BBY, or years before the Battle of Yavin. I'm not going to talk too much about them because I think people pretty well know who they are and what they've done. Padme obviously dying in Episode 3 while in childbirth with Luke and Leia, and Anakin dying at the end of Episode 6. So Padme's parents, we have Rui Nabari and Jobel Nabari. They were born 77 and 76 years before the Battle of Yavin, respectively. They don't play a huge role in anything. They are in a deleted scene from Episode 2, but we do get a shot of them at Padme's funeral in Episode 3. Beyond that, there's very little information we have on them. But if we stick with Padme's family, we get to at least one other character who plays a pretty significant role. We do know that Padme has a sister named Sola, who was born in 50 BBY. We don't have an actual death date for her. She doesn't really appear after the prequels, and she gets married to a man named Darad Janren, who takes the Nabari last name because of how important it was on Theed. The two of them have two daughters, the oldest being Ryu Nabari, born in 28 BBY, and then Pooja Nabari, born in 25 BBY. We don't get much information on Ryu and the rest of this side of the family, but we do have a few appearances from Pooja. She was similarly in a cutscene from Attack of the Clones and shows up at Padme's funeral like a lot of Padme's family, but additionally she shows up in Star Wars Galaxies as the senator in the Imperial Senate for Naboo. So we actually find out that she becomes close friends with Leia through just working in the Senate together, and then later on in 36 ABY, when the two are finally made aware that they are in fact cousins, they start talking about their family history as well. So not a major character, but someone who does come back from Padme's side of the family, which often gets kind of overlooked here. With that said, let's jump back to Anakin. So Anakin, again, born in 41 BBY to Shmi Skywalker. The most clear picture of his parentage after Shmi's line in Episode 1 that there was no father comes from the Darth Plagueis novel, where we find out Darth Plagueis has been attempting to manipulate midichlorians to create life and cheat death, and Plagueis theorizes that the midichlorians acted to make Anakin Skywalker themselves. He was created as kind of the will of the Force. So I thought about putting the Force on the family tree, but I wasn't sure on the birth or death dates for the Force. Abeloth, I guess, is trying to kill it, but we'll see about that. Between Episode 1 and Episode 2, Shmi does get married to Cliegg Lars, who was born in 82 BBY and dies in 20 BBY, with Shmi dying 2 years before. Cliegg has a son named Owen, who we meet as Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru in Episode 4. Owen was born in 52 BBY, and Beru was born in 47. They obviously both die in Episode 4. With a lot of the adoptions, I have drawn them with additional connecting lines here, just to make it clear what some of the family relationships are. This would make Shmi Owen's stepmother, but it seems like Owen was already an adult himself before Cliegg and Shmi got married, so while Shmi and Owen actually were quite close, based on what little information we have, I haven't really marked her as a stepmother because she didn't really have a role in raising Owen. This whole section of the family tree is a little bit circular, so it can be a little hard to go through it in a logical way, but this brings us to Luke and Leia, born of course in 19 BBY at the end of Episode 3, and both adopted by different families after the death of Padme and Anakin becoming Darth Vader. Luke was of course adopted by his father's stepbrother, his uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and then Leia was adopted by Bail Organa, a senator from Alderaan, and his wife, the Queen of Alderaan, Breha Organa. Bail was born in 67 BBY and died, along with Breha, in 0 BBY when Alderaan was destroyed. With Breha, we have a pretty wide range of dates available for her. I chose kind of the earlier end of it, so that's why it says circa 59 BBY there. Again, not an exact number available. They didn't have any other children, however, Winter, another character who becomes kind of important in the post-Endor period, was kind of raised alongside Leia, more in an assistant role, but relatively close as they were growing up. Leia got married to Han Solo in 8 ABY, though there's like 3 different stories that have their wedding in it going different ways at different times. Han was born in 29 BBY, and much like Luke and Leia, we don't actually get a year of death for them. We know that they must die at some point between Crucible, which is about 44 ABY, and the Legacy comics, which takes place in about the 130s ABY, but there are some flashbacks in that period that show in like the 90s ABY without them where you think they would be, so they're probably dead by that point, but we don't get a full picture of their lives. Effectively, the publishing for Legends ends with them still alive. Han's family tree is a bit of a mess as well. We don't know too much about his parents directly. We do know about his cousin, Thraken Sal Solo, and that the Solos are a relatively prominent family on Corellia in general. But before we jump over to Luke's side of the family tree, we're going to keep going with Han and Leia's descendants. They had 3 kids, the first of which were twins born in the year 9 ABY, so that's Jason and Jaina Solo, and then the next year they had Anakin Solo during the Dark Empire books, with Jason and Jaina being born during the Thrawn trilogy. Anakin Solo, named after his grandfather, was killed in 27 ABY in the Yuuzhan Vong War. That war also claimed the life of Chewbacca, a longtime family friend who it feels kind of weird to not have on this family tree. But both Jaina and Jason survived the war, and both would go on to have kids of their own. First, Jason had a daughter named Alana with their childhood friend Tenel Ka. Their relationship and the father of Alana was mostly kept a secret from the galaxy, and the two were never officially married. Jason was killed in 41 ABY by his sister Jaina after he became the Sith Lord Darth Caedus. Jason had fallen to the dark side after seeing a vision of his daughter Alana on a white throne, kind of ruling the galaxy as a Jedi Queen, though with a dark figure beside her. Others, including Luke, had seen a similar vision, and it seems like Alana would have been a pretty primary character going forward past Crucible if other books, like the Sword of the Jedi trilogy that had been planned to be written by Christie Golden, had gone forward. We do get some of her early life with her grandparents Leia and Han, where she travels with them to help hide her identity, and she goes by the name Amelia Solo. Tenel Ka had hoped to keep her safe from Hapan politics, which involved a lot of infighting and a lot of personal danger to the royal family. Tenel Ka had no real desire to rule herself until she was forced into the position, so she wanted to protect her daughter from that and allow her to connect to her father's family as well, so Han and Leia seemed like the best candidates for that. In the end of Fate of the Jedi and Crucible, her actual identity does come forward and she starts her Jedi training. The other twin of Han and Leia, Jaina Solo, marries Jagged Fel, a fighter pilot who was raised among the Chiss but comes from the family of Baron Soontir Fel, an Imperial ace pilot. His mother is actually Sile Antilles, the sister of Wedge Antilles. This is probably another family tree that I could flesh out along with the Hapan royal family that I kind of have indicated on the chart here. But again, everyone in Star Wars is pretty much related to everyone else, so eventually it all connects back together. They have at least one child together. They may have had more, but we don't know exactly how their family progresses from their generation, since Jagged Fel becomes the Emperor, making him Emperor Fel the First. We know that there is just one generation between them and the Legacy comics, so there is Fel the Second, who isn't giving a picture or an official name, but that unknown character, Fel the Second, has a son named Rowan Fel, who's the Emperor during the Legacy comics when they start. Rowan has a daughter named Marasiah Fel. Marasiah was born around 119 years after the Battle of Yavin, and becomes the Empress when she's quite young after the death of her father in 138 ABY. There are some stories that involve her working with her distant cousin, who we're going to talk about in a moment, but the story of Legends ends with her as the Empress, and it seems like we would have gotten a lot more of her and more fleshing out of this side of the Fel family. Unfortunately, other than her and Rowan, we don't get much that's officially laid out at this point. So with that, we're going to jump back over to Luke's side of the family, which is actually even less fleshed out. There are a few kind of speculative points that I've made here that I've indicated with purple parts on the chart, so I'm going to be very clear on what's officially stated and what is just kind of conjecture or what is kind of inferred from some of the information that is available. But we do know that Luke gets married to Mara Jade Skywalker, who was born in 17 BBY and died in 40 ABY when she's killed by Darth Caedus. The two together have a son named Ben in 26 ABY. Ben is, of course, still alive when the stories in Fate of the Jedi and Crucible end, so it seems like Ben and Alana would have been the central focus of a lot of those, along with Jaina. Jaina and Leia at that point were also members of the Jedi High Council along with Luke, though they stopped being part of it at some point over the next 100 years. This is where we get into a bit of speculation. We know that Ben has to have at least one kid, though he could have had more. He definitely had at least one, and we don't know who he gets married to or has kids with. But in Fate of the Jedi, we meet Vestera Kai, a member of the Lost Tribe of the Sith who's put forward as a potential romantic interest for Ben. Because the timeline ends, we never really figure out where this is going, if anywhere, but I've included her as the kind of speculative possible mother of this branch of the family tree, because that is just what's put forward by the last set of books we have. It's not something that's ever officially confirmed. It's not even necessarily implied that she's the mother of the characters who show up or the grandmother of the characters who show up later in the Legacy era. I've just included her because she was a possible candidate and she was mentioned. That's why she's in purple. The next confirmed members of the Skywalker family that we get are Nat Bantharok Skywalker and Cole Skywalker. It's not even clear how many generations have passed between Ben and them. It's possible that Ben would even be their father, but since it seems like they were born around 70 to 80 years after the Battle of Yavin, it's not impossible again that Ben would have been their father, but that would have made Ben fairly old when he had them, and it would also be kind of towards the beginning of the possible dates for their birth. It seems like they weren't super old when they died, with Cole Skywalker dying in 130 ABY and Nat Skywalker dying in 138 ABY. So I've gone with the assumption that there's only one generation between them, because the math kind of works out better. It's possible there'd be two generations, but also just basing it on how many generations they went with between Jaina and Marasiah, or rather Jaina and Rowan. I've just gone with the baseline assumption that there is only one hypothetical Skywalker between Ben and Nat and Cole. Part of the assumptions on the ages here also comes from the age of Morrigan Cord. We don't get an official birth date for her, but the artist who designed her was designing her to be around 40 years old, which would have put her birth within a couple years of 97 ABY. So it would make sense that Cole, even if he's somewhat older, because they met when she was a field agent and he was a member of the Jedi High Council, that it wouldn't probably be more than a decade, maybe two at most. So that again puts Cole Skywalker's earliest birth date at around 80 ABY, which would have made Ben in his 50s or even 60s when he had him. So that's another reason for my assumption here of one generation between them. Morrigan Cord, also known as Nina Calixta, was a member of the Empire and later served as a Moff. She would come into conflict with Cole later, so the relationship didn't last. Their marriage ended when she began an affair with an Imperial Moff, Morlish Veed. The son of Cole and Morrigan, Cade Skywalker, is the main character of the Legacy comics. He's a powerful Force user, but has a severe drug addiction and is also at risk of falling to the dark side for a good portion of the Legacy comics. He does work with the Sith at points, although interventions from Force visions of his ancestors and his mom and other family members all play a role in bringing him back to the light. Included in that is his uncle Nat Skywalker, who goes by the name Bantharok after leaving the Jedi Order. He was killed after joining the Jedi again to fight the One Sith. protecting his nephew Cade and the Jedi Master Marasiah as they tried to evacuate the Jedi Temple on Tavis. Somewhat later in his life, Nat got married to Drew, a member of Clan Voss who included former Jedi Quinlan Voss. She had a daughter named Anna from a prior marriage who was then adopted by Nat as well, and the two, Nat and Drew, adopted 2 more children, Skeeto Rock and Mika Rock, Mika being a Cathar. Most of Nat's adopted family was unaware that he was actually a Skywalker and remained therefore unaware of their own heritage from that side of their family now, so they went by the Rock name. That's going to do it for our look at the Skywalker and Solo family trees as they existed at the end of Legends. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm hoping to do a similar one on the canon side, and I'd also like to do a few of the other families, some of which I mention in this video as well, and maybe even a similar idea with the Jedi Council or even Sith Lords. I did a prior version of the Rule of 2 Sith Lords, but I feel like I could get a bit more information into them and do that layout a little bit better, because this is obviously still kind of rough, but I have some better ideas on how to handle it. If there is a specific family you'd like to see talked about in this way, or a similar kind of idea that would work in this kind of presentation that you'd like to hear more about, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you have enjoyed, consider leaving a like or subscribing for more. Thanks for watching, hope to see you next time. Bye everyone.